Okay, good afternoon. Appreciate you guys coming in. Again, my name is Phil, and as Tim said, I've been part of the CAL FIRE Wildland Urban Interface working group since it started. We're trying to finish it off and get it out to the field. What I'm about to do is run through the presentation that was put out to the field last year. It's a cut-down model, and it's been updated a little bit. I'm hoping to get it done here fairly quickly. Looking at the group, it's running about 50-50 as far as wildland firefighters or managers. I don't really expect to focus on engine captains or ICs per se, but kind of give the scope of what's happening out there, the terminology, and where people are going so that everyone has a feel for it. Again, I don't have time to go through every little piece of it, but what we want is to familiarize with the terminology and how it's working and what we're thinking about, so that in years to come it'll be second nature when someone says, "Hey, I'm doing prep and go," or I'm in the middle of I'm in pace right now trying to explain that to you. So hopefully it'll work. So this afternoon we're going to go through CAL FIRE's Leader's Intent. That's a document that the working group put together for our department director. We'll talk about terminology, both CAL FIRE terminology and FIRESCOPE terminology as it's used here in California. And I just went blank. Got your back. We'll talk about terminology that FIRESCOPE's putting out, as well as what CAL FIRE is doing, WUI strategy and tactics here in California, and I'll go through the FIRESCOPE's evac and repopulation checklist, as well as CAL FIRE's evacuation repopulation checklist, and that's kind of my goals this afternoon. When we were asked to put this together for the department, we came up with a leader's intent statement for both the incident commander as well as for the department director. We looked at the changing faces of CAL FIRE, and we had a bunch of new young leaders at the company officer level as well as the battalion chief level, and we wanted to give them something to stand on that allows them to make good decisions without very direct supervision, basically allowing them to go out and look at a complex situation, make correct actions, and do it safely. And so this is where the leader's intent statement comes from. It's very similar to the military's commander's intent or leader's intent that they use, and it allows folks to go out and understand what it is their boss wants and make the right decisions based on a framework that they already have ingrained into them. Again, what we're trying to do is get this into our corporate knowledge, into our culture, so that when our engineers and captains and battalion chiefs go out, they start from the beginning on a good foundation. And that foundation in Wildland Urban Interface is based on continuous situational awareness, that they're going to always be looking at what's out there and how they're fitting into it. Situational awareness is something that's kind of thrown around quite a bit, and we spent, but a lot of people don't know what it is or can define it. What we're trying to do is define that and incorporate it into our culture. The boss wanted us to stress that firefighter and public safety is paramount, and we're not going to throw people into wildland urban interface situations if it's not defendable, if it's not safe to do so. That no structure, no infrastructure is more valuable than our employees and civilians that are out there. It's understood that we're not going to compromise our safety, and we're doing this, and that we're going to make sure that when we're out there, that we get that down to our lowest firefighter. That containment strategies will be integrated into perimeter control and fire suppression, and that we're going to defend those assets concurrently, that we're not going to either do structure protection or defense, or we're not going to do perimeter control, but we're going to try and do them simultaneously. We understand that the best way to protect structures is to suppress the fire. So a good aggressive initial attack is always something that the CAL FIRE director wants us to do. That the number one priority should be to suppress the fire before it reaches the structures if possible. And that good preparation and pre-planning is key to our success. Being out there and having a good wildland pre-attack plan, having our firefighters in the area before the fire occurs, we're going to make them more successful once the area has a problem. We want to take appropriate actions based on leaders' intent, and I'll discuss some of these terms here later in the program, but appropriate actions based on leaders' intent. So we need to teach our supervisors what leaders' intent is and how to communicate that. That'll allow their subordinates to take the appropriate action based on that leader's intent, not independent action or freelancing, but appropriate action. That when we have resources out there in the field, and they're out there sitting on a structure that's not immediately threatened, they need to make that structure stand alone or defensible without anybody there. They need to be actively engaged in preparing it so that when the fire gets there, we don't have to have an engine there. It'll be threatened on defense, or threatened or not threatened. Excuse me. So we want to have folks out there not sitting in lawn chairs or sitting on the bumpers of engines, 72 hours in advance of a fire. They're out there, they're making it defendable, and they're moving on. It's just a good use of all of our resources. The director recognizes that property owners have a responsibility to prepare their structures for defense, and that they need to abide by Public Resources Code 4291. That Type 3 engines are the best choice for wildland urban interface operations. It doesn't mean that a Type 1 or a Type 2 or a municipal engine can't do it, but it's a wildland fire in and amongst the homes, and it's therefore the Type 3 or the wildland engines, and it could be Type 4s or 6s in other areas. That's the best engine, the wildland engine is the best engine to do urban interface operations. That everybody who's out there needs to be properly trained and equipped. That's just a common sense statement there. And we want to order the closest and deploy the most appropriate resources to engage in structure protection or structure defense and perimeter control. And that's not just engines. It's not, but it includes crews, dozers, and their resources. So we want to use all the tools available to us. One of the other things that the director and the Wildland Urban Interface group talked about was division supervisors and span of control. We believe that perimeter control and structure defense can be contained within one geographic area, and we're trying to limit the use of structure groups and structure branches as a default choice for structure protection. That puts two layers of supervision into the same geographic area, one to protect structures and one to do perimeter control. Two separate goals and strategies, really, if you look at it, and that complicates things. People are, I could put the fire out if I had two more engines. Well, I can't help you put the fire out because I'm defending homes right now. If we layer all that into one supervisor, it simplifies the process and the chain of command within the incident command system. So that's kind of the running through the leader's intent that the director gave us, and that's what we're putting into all of our company officers and chief officers. FIRESCOPE, when they went through, and I'll give you links to a lot of these things at the end of the presentation. The FIRESCOPE in California put out a document, and it talks about interface and intermix. And this will assist everybody in their situational awareness when they're out there, because you're going to be in different operating procedures based on whether you're in the interface, which is an area that's just clearly demarcation between structures and the wildland fuels, basically that clear edge of the community or the city. One side of the road is homes, and one side of the road is wildland fuels, or the intermix, which is where you have wildland fuels intermixed within the structures. So there's different strategy and tactics that we're going to use in those two different scenarios that you'll find out there. Really what we want to make sure is that our company officers and our chief officers understand where they're at and apply the right actions to those two different situations. One of the things we looked at was changing it from structure protection to structure defense. Structure protection implies that the structure is survivable, that it's protectable. And firefighters that are out there protecting homes, that's, in our minds, that's an offensive strategy. We're going out there to protect something. We're going to take an offensive step to do it. And really what we're doing is a defensive posture. We're standing and protecting or defending the home from the fire. So we want to make sure it's clear in our head and we use the right terminology. And when we're doing structure protection, we're out there, pretending like we're doing offensive steps. The public expects us to continue to do that and to protect their homes. What we're trying to do is turning into a defensive posture. We believe that it's truly structure defense. So that structure defense is a defensive strategy, and implies that the firefighters will do their best to save that structure, but we're not going to compromise their safety. Safety is always the #1 priority in our minds, and that we'll withdraw to a safe location and return if we have to. That structured defense, then once we realize that it is a defensive posture, helps us to see that we're no longer in an offensive mode, that we're in a defensive mode. Firefighters by nature always want to go offense. We always want to put the fire out. We always want to attack it. When we're doing structured defense, we can't attack. We can't suppress because we're in a defensive mode. So that's the two differences that we see, and so we're now starting to look at it as a structured defense mode and a defensive posture. It's, we teach our firefighters that when you're in structured defense, and that may be the most appropriate place based on fire behavior and resources you have to throw out a fire, but once you're in structured defense, you need to be looking for opportunities to go offensive again and make that switch. So that's one of the reasons we're really hitting that up. FIRESCOPE pushed through, as did CAL FIRE, fire behavior forecasting, and we are trying to get our firefighters to look back at just common sense things that we learned in the first 5 years of our firefighting careers, and that's getting back into the IRPG, the response guide, pocket guide, and looking at what it says about firefighting. Look up, look down, look around, look ×3 indicators. There's times when if we looked at the look ×3 indicators and really looked at the extreme fire behavior indicators for long-range spotting, sustained ground runs, we wouldn't be there at that structure. We'd say, if this was a grove of trees on a hill or a ridge top, there's no reason for us to be there based on those fire behavior standard references that we use. Why are we there? Why are we there to protect a home that's not defendable? Why are we there to protect a home that the homeowner didn't actually take steps to protect him or herself? So we want to realize where we're at, see what we're doing, use those tools that we would use anywhere else when we're doing hose lays and handline construction, and apply them to structures, because it helps us to make sense of why it is that we'll back out for a little bit, let it do its thing, and come back in. One of the things that we're looking at is entrapment and avoidance, and how we're gonna stop that. And so we're really hitting our young engineers and captains on this. Again, back to my earlier statement here, if we truly use the 10 standard firefighting orders and looked at the watch-out situations and use them as they are intended, tell us, hey, we need to be careful here, we're doing a frontal assault, and we looked at some of the common denominators of tragedy fires, we wouldn't be there in that subdivision protecting those homes. We're out on that ridge protecting that isolated home, or driving through long driveways through chimneys to get to 2 or 3 ranch houses out there. We just wouldn't do it if it was to go out and suppress the fire. Why are we doing it for homes? So we need to make sure we're applying those tools that we'd use everywhere for the wildland situation. So we're pushing that on our firefighters. We're pushing decision points. You might see decision points as management points or management objective points or the old trigger points. We've recently, California started calling them decision points. So we want to have decision points that are realistic. If we're going to send firefighters out to protect homes up on a ridge, and they're going to be doing a check and go, or evaluating it to see if the folks are out, the civilians are out, we're going to set up appropriate decision points that are realistic. When the fire reaches this point, you're going to need to make a decision. Either you can accomplish your mission, or you retreat from your assignment and come back to your safety zones. But we're not just going to put them out there and say, wait till the fire gets to you and see what happens. So decision points are being pushed on maps now, and they're being pushed out through the ICs down to even the company officers, to the firefighters. When the fire hits this creek, we're going to make a decision, and the decision is going to be to do 1, 2, or 3, and that way everybody has a plan and they understand the plan. The IRPG has a 5-step risk management process, and we're just making sure the IRPG is a tool that we use all the time, and we're using it in the Wildland Urban Interface, and we should. And so we're really pushing that on them, that maintain their situational awareness and trying to define what that is and allow them to understand it and use it appropriately. But they're staying focused on what's happening now what's going to happen in the future, that they give a good hazard assessment of where they're at in the Wildland Urban Interface, what are the hazards for this structure that they're defending or this community that they're defending, and what are the controls or the mitigations that can be done. And once they do that, they can come up with a decision point on what steps will be taken after that. We're going to evacuate. We're going to, deploy hose lays. We're going to move to a safe refuge area, or a temporary refuge area. All those things that can happen will be based on those decision points. And again, we're trying to push on them that, evaluate and evaluate and evaluate. Make sure that everybody's got it heads on a swivel. They're looking at it and constantly reevaluating. Because what we're finding is people are doing it once, and then they're getting to work, and all of a sudden the fire's in front of them. And well, how'd that happen? Well, they weren't maintaining their situational awareness, and they weren't reevaluating as conditions changed at their site. So we're getting them back into the IRPG. So let's talk about safety zones, escape routes, and temporary refuge areas. It's a classic, California type fire. It's coming off the hill that you see on the screen. It's good flame length. It's moving on them. And so I'll back up for a second. She's coming in with a strike team or an engine, and the division supervisor, the IC, says, hey, get in there, protect as many homes as you can, take a peek at it, establish safety zones and escape routes, maintain your LCES, your lookouts, communications, escape routes to your safety zones, and protect as much as you can. Once things settle down, I'll get some resources into you when they come in. So you send your firefighters in there, and they get faced with something like this. We're doing that time and time again. And what we're finding is safety zones are based on fire behavior forecasting, safety zone determination, and structured triage. They're all interrelated. But you have to have a good safety zone, and it's based on current and forecasted fire behavior. And we're not doing a very good job on that. If you look at the IRPG, here's the definition of it right now, and it's throughout both the federal curriculum as well as CAL FIRE's curriculum and FIRESCOPE's curriculum, that a safety zone should be free of flammable vegetation where you don't need a fire shelter, and that you're clear of at least 4 times the maximum flame height. And if it's going to come around you, it needs to be all around you. So 4 times the flame height to you and on your backside as well. So you've got full circle, and that's based on the 2010 IRPG. And that there is a caveat in there that also says that this 4 times the height of the flame may not be applicable in the Wildland Urban Interface, just because there's too many variables. That 4 times is really truly for out in the field, out on the hillside. So if we go back to this, my earlier scenario for you, let's see if I can do this. Yeah, I can. There it is. So, you gave me this as maybe 20, 30-foot flame heights in here. And so if you do 4 times the height of the flame lake, so if it comes into this area here or coming out of this canyon here, just say 30 foot, that's about 120 feet to one side, 240 for basically over an acre that you're going to need clearance for a safety zone. Plus you'll need escape routes to that. Who's to say that the road infrastructure in here will still be open? The escape routes or those routes that you got in are still there to get out. So if you look in here, where in this area are you going to find an acre along that edge to have a true safety zone where you're not going to need a shelter? Maybe this parking lot for this hospital or whatever it is, but it's not around in this area. So we just sent folks in there saying, get safety zones, make sure you have escape routes, use your LCS, and protect structures, knowing full well that they're not going to have an adequate safety zone in any of this area. They're not going to be able to get it. And so that, as the IC, I sent them in there as a strike team leader, the company officer. Those individuals just accepted it, but it's not something that's feasible. You can't have, without the presence of escape routes, so we shouldn't be deploying folks into defense structures. You gotta, is out of the way. You gotta have all that stuff. So how do we get around it? Well, we came up with just moving out of the area. If you don't have safety zones, if you can't maintain your escape routes, time and distance is an adequate way to get it. But and that leads us to not defending structures or not protecting structures, which is okay, except in that previous example, you know, in that community, there's still folks that hadn't evacuated. There's still a life threat out there. And, you know, firefighting is dangerous, and it's our job to protect lives. So we have to go in there. We have to actually take a forward step. So how do we do it? Well, the way we came up to it was temporary refuge areas. Temporary refuge areas, a pre-planned area where firefighters can take refuge and temporarily shelter short-term for short-term thermal relief without using a shelter. When we started looking through case histories, both within our department and throughout the United States, we saw time and time again that people were leaving relatively safe areas or passing relatively safe areas along their escape routes to get to a safety zone, but getting hurt in more dangerous areas along that route. They were leaving rocks, trees. They were leaving homes. They were leaving pools. They were leaving grassy fields, going into the brush or the trees, or driving down a road with no protection to get to their safety zone, and they were getting hurt there. And so we said, how do you fix that? So we came up with temporary refuge areas. Temporary refuge areas are those things that, you know, I used as an old crew captain out in the field. You know, the fire's burning hot. It's you pull the crew, you know, it pulses. You pull the crew back a little bit. You get them out of the heat, and you just sit in the lee side of the cut bank, or you walk behind a tree, let the heat blow by you, and then you re-engage. That's a temporary refuge area. You see quite a bit in Wildland Urban Interface areas where firefighters will enter a structure or enter their engine, let the heat blow through, and 2, 3, 4 minutes later get back out and go back to work. That's a temporary refuge area. There's nothing that's wrong with that. We just need to make sure we understand that we're using temporary refuge areas, and that we understand that you have to move to get to a TRA. You can't be out in the middle of the field, because that, by definition, it's not a refuge area. You need to take shelter somewhere. And when you're taking that refuge, when you're taking that steps, we need to understand that we are having to do something to protect ourselves. Either I need to disengage and continue using temporary refuge areas along my escape route to get to my safety zone and reevaluate, or understand that I just used a TRA. I'm going to go back offensive on this, but at some point, if I got to use TRAs once or twice more, then I need to reevaluate. So a couple key things with TRAs is that it's a temporary place. It's not a replacement for a safety zone. We need to understand when we're using them and realize and recognize that we're using them. If it takes an action or a maneuver, it's something, it's a forward step that we're having to do. So here's some examples of TRAs. The lee side of structures, inside a structure, in a vehicle. Unlike a safety zone, that may be some distance away, it's readily available for you, and it could be either offensive or defensive. And by what I mean for that is, I'm using I have to move into a TRA, let it pulse for a little bit, and then as soon as the heat backs back down, I'm going to go offensive on it and try and take the heat out of the next pulse by throwing a lot of water at it, or going with the hand crew and cut line, or using dozers on it, and really hit it hard in that before the next heat builds up and pulses again. Or I'm going defensive on it. I'm going to back into my TRA, let it pulse, realize that, hey, I've misjudged the fire behavior and I need to get out of here. I'm going to, you know, as soon as it settles down, I'm going to grab my escape routes and I'm going to start using TRAs to get out. It's not a substitute for safety zones, and we recommend pre-identifying I can't even say it right now, temporary refuge areas throughout the site, because they're everywhere. Just like safety zones, you know, it can be multiple safety zones. It can be multiple TRAs. Again, the vehicle, behind a tree, behind a wall, behind the house, the lee side of a cut bank, all kinds of places. Vehicles, the engines that we drive, the command vehicles that we drive, that's probably the best TRA that we have, because it is so mobile, and it is, you can get in there and you can get away quickly. They got to be pre-positioned in a good, safe location, easily accessible, unobstructed access to the escape route. But we also got to understand that modern apparatus are filled full of a lot of plastics. If some of the old timers remember the crank fire from the mid '80s, where a couple Forest Service engines and CAL FIRE engines did a deployment in a clearing in Lassen Modoc, and fire burnt all around them. The canteens were boiling on the dashboard. The firefighters inside were in good shape because the engines were able to make it. Those days are gone because our engines are now made with a lot of plastics. So we want to make sure that our firefighters understand that they can use an apparatus that's probably the best TRA possible, but it's a short-term refuge, and if you can't drive out, you're not going to be able to ride that thing out like the old engines and sit in it while it's on fire, because it's going to off-gas and smoke you out before it burns you up. So if you're using an engine for a TRA, you want to make sure that you look at it and go, okay, this is the best place based on fire behavior and intensity. I've got clearance around the vehicle. There's no heavy fuels next to it. There's the expected burnout or direct flame impingement will be short, and there's no big heat sources around there like down logs or burning structures and stuff like that. Again, you're gonna want to drive away with that engine if possible. A lot of the same characteristics involve using a structure as a safe refuge area. We want to make sure that we're not counting on that structure as a safe refuge area and saying, hey, we're going to, when the fire comes down here, we're just going to use that structure as a safety zone, and we're going to, once the fire burns here, we're going to come out and start fighting fire again. But it's a temporary refuge area. It's not our default refuge area. So we're looking at a lot of the same clearance areas. And then bodies of water. A couple of high-profile cases, recently where people left bodies of water. And while it's not our first choice, it should be considered the last resort to getting away. We can use bodies of water for TRA as well. So that's kind of a quick one on temporary refuge areas. CAL FIRE and FIRESCOPE now have triaged 3 separate categories of structures out in the Wildland Urban Interface. And again, we want our firefighters to start to use these terms, and you'll hear some other terms coming up shortly. We want that to come into our vernacular so that just like a firefighter will, you pull up on scene and someone will go, hey, I want you to go in interior, you'll be our interior attack. Second engine's going to be roof ventilation. Those tactics, that terminology of interior operations or interior and roof ventilation, those are common terms within the fire service. We want these to be common terms as well, so that you show up and I say, hey, house number 1 is non-threatened, house number 2 is threatened, defendable, and house number 3 is not non-defendable. Those are things that just come off, and everyone understands clearly what I'm saying when I say that. So we'll get into non-threatened now. Non-threatened means it's probably not going to be threatened based on the fire behavior that you see there. There's good clearance around it. There's a green belt. The structure is constructed to resist flammable impingement or flame impingement. So this will probably last without having a firefighter right there to protect it. So that's not threatened. Threatened defensible means that there's safety zones there, temporary refuge areas, but there's something about the house due to fire behavior that you see in the background or clearance that you need to have a fire engine there to protect it. It's threatened yet defensible. The firefighters, based on their skills, knowledge, and abilities and the fire behavior that they see, can stay at this home through a flame front and be safe and defend that home that you see right there. The last one is threatened non-defensible. And so you can see there's lots of vegetation around this, right up to it, poor road clearance. There's just not a lot of stuff here. There's no safety zones, no TRAs for the firefighters. The homeowner itself hasn't taken any steps to protect it and to provide it 4291 100-foot defensible space around it. So this does allow firefighters to commit to stay and protect that structure. So there's a couple of things we need to understand when we're looking at these 3 categories, is that the fire behavior at any time is going to dictate what's going to happen to that structure. The skills, knowledge, and abilities of the crew to protect that house. Can they get up there and do it, and how's it going to work for them? Other assets out there are lives at risk in other areas. What's the risk versus gain of putting our folks out there? And the structure's ability to withstand that fire short-term or long-term. Finally, is there safety zones, escape routes, and TRAs in that? So I'll go back to this one right here. And I'm trying to grab my little pointer. It's not. There it is. So this house right here, as we said, in this case, we're going to say it's threatened undefensible. What if my fire is at 2 o'clock in the morning and I've got a 1-foot creeping ground fire? Based on, certain engines would be able to drive in through here. Certain crews would feel comfortable with that, pulling off their chainsaws if they're properly equipped and providing some defensible space. And so in that case, this house may turn into threatened but defendable. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's 100 degrees with a 5 to 8 mile per hour wind. There's very few firefighters, if any, in California that would find this as threatened, defendable. It probably would all be threatened undefensible. So what we want to make sure is we look at each house based on the fire behavior, fuels, weather, and conditions, the skills, knowledge, and abilities of our crews, and make the right triage, put the structures into the right triage category. So that's going to change from time of day to day to who's out there to protect it. So just because one is threatened defensible now doesn't mean it's going to be threatened defensible throughout the life of the incident. Now, if you put a group of firefighters together and you tell them to work, you tell them to come up with tell them to come up with a program, we're always going to come up with an acronym. So this is the acronym that we came up with, SFACS. This incorporates all the things that you ever used as a new firefighter. Your look times 3 in the fire behavior, fire environment, your access, old bridges, narrow roads, using, looking at gang mailboxes, seeing one road with 20 mailboxes on it, guessing that there's probably 20 homes up there, roads through steep, narrow chimneys, clearance around structures, construction of those structures themselves, incorporates all of that stuff into an acronym. And the way this works is there's a card out there in the field that CAL FIRE uses, and it talks about the firefighter and the civilian survival, things that we need to evaluate. It just incorporates all those checkpoints. What are those things, and how does it fit within our safety and our civilian safety? For the fire behavior and the environment, from the look up, look down, look around, access, egress, clearance, construction, how's the clearance around it, and even if it has a 100-foot clearance, based on the fire behavior that we're seeing, is 100-foot enough? Looking at the construction, even if it's a hardened structure, or if it's not a hardened structure, but it's a low flame heights, will this be defendable? Put that with time constraints or reflex time. How long is it going to take me to get up there? How long is it going to take me to get my situational awareness and evaluate it? How long is it going to take the fire to get there? Am I going to be able to beat the fire, or is the fire going to beat me there? All that SFACT leads into, I'm going to stay here or I'm going to go. It's safe for me to stay and protect it, or I'm going to do some prep or not do some prep. I'm going to evacuate the civilians and get out of here. That's a quick, rough one there, but it goes quickly, but good little tool, and our firefighters reporting good success in using that tool. Let's talk about evacuations. In California, the authority to order a planned evacuation resides with law enforcement having jurisdiction. It doesn't mean that firefighters won't show up and get on a PA and start asking people to evacuate under a wildland fire environment. It doesn't mean that we don't go door to door if there's no law enforcement to do it. But that authority lies with law enforcement, so we need to get them in early. We recommend using law enforcement in an evacuation branch or a group, or putting them into the incident command as an IC, Unified Commander, to ensure coordination and planning throughout all the evacuation operations. The 2012 FOG guide in FIRESCOPE has a couple different protective actions, and that includes evacuation warning, evacuation order, sheltering in place, and rescue. Now, that's the firefighters telling law enforcement how to do their job, and they don't always like that. So some law enforcement officers or communities have embraced these terminologies. Some of them use the terms mandatory. Some of them use other terms. Really doesn't matter to CAL FIRE. It doesn't really matter to me what terms they use. I need to put my world into their terminology. So if they say, hey, we don't use evacuation order, we use mandatory evacuation. Okay, I just cut and replace mandatory order for, evacuation order for mandatory evacuations, as long as the concept's the same. These are the terms that FIRESCOPE uses, and it's the goal of FIRESCOPE working with California emergency responders, both within law enforcement and the fire service, to try and standardize it. And at some point, hopefully we will. So here's a definition of a warning, evacuation warning. It alerts citizens to a potential threat, puts them on standby, basically, saying, hey, you know, at some point something could happen. You need to be packed. You need to have your paperwork, all your prized possessions in a car ready to go, your animals, small children ready to go in case we upgrade to an evacuation order. An evacuation order is issued when an immediate evacuation is required. Under California law, law enforcement does not have the authority to pull somebody out of their house and make them evacuate. That's just the law. If they're in a public place, say on a street or in another public place like a business, they can issue and enforce an evacuation order. But if they're in the home, we can't evacuate them and mandate it. We can't hook them up and arrest them. What law enforcement can do, though, is they can take children into protective custody to protect them, and then strongly suggest that the parents come with them if they find that situation. But if someone's out there and says, I don't want to evacuate, there's nothing in California that says that law enforcement can make them evacuate. Sheltering in place is something that we do when we don't have time or it's not safe to get them out. That will shelter folks in their homes or in a safe location, maybe a safe refuge area, a large plowed field or near a lake. Put them there temporarily so we can get them out to a safe place. So that's sheltering in place. Oftentimes, though, it's just rescue. We're sending firefighters in. They're pulling people out of homes, putting them in the backs of fire engines, or escorting them out in their own vehicles. It's where we're going in and recovering or removing injured and trapped civilians. So those are the four major protective actions that FIRESCOPE talks about. When we're talking about evacuations, we're going to use those terminologies or those protective actions as we go through this process. Trying to get the evacuations done, we got to work and coordinate with law enforcement as quickly as possible. They got to establish decision points and make sure it occurs in a timely manner. We recommend co-locating with the law enforcement having jurisdiction, getting their supervisors out in the field together with our field supervisors, getting their ICs together with our ICPs so we don't have two separate command posts. If they won't do that, then if they can't do that, we're sending a liaison over there to work with them as well. Basically, sending a liaison officer from our organization into their incident command post and providing that tactical information they want. We talk about traffic closure levels. There's 4 separate traffic closure levels that we're dealing with in California. Of course, Penal Code 4095 means that it doesn't close media out. They can still come past our traffic closure levels or points. FIRESCOPE has, as I said, 4 traffic closure levels, and they just recently color-coded them, green, yellow, orange, and red. So when we're setting up a map or we're sending cops out to set up a perimeter, we want to use this terminology. Level 1 is for residents only, to keep the looky-loos out. 2 is allowing other folks to get in there, like PG&E or Southern California Edison or our electricity providers. Road folks to ensure the bridges and abutments and signage is still good after a fire. They can get in there under a 2. Under a 3, it's just law enforcement and firefighters, and level 4 is nobody. Don't let anybody in under that traffic closure. In this case, in this slide, it talks about the immediate need evacuation checklist. FIRESCOPE's come up with an immediate need checklist. It's real short, real down and dirty, and it's a good tool for folks to use. CAL FIRE went through something and did something a little bit more complex. And Tim, if I can get it to my computer real quick. I'll run through this form real quick.
I just started the screen share, so you should see it in a moment. There we go.
Okay. All right. Can everyone see that? You can see that, Tim? Is it working?
Yes.
Okay. So we came up with an evacuation and repopulation plan. It's very similar in concept to what FIRESCOPE did. It's just a little bit more detail-orientated. It's 9 pages. It has instructions to it, so you can sit down, a firefighter can sit down with a law enforcement guy or girl and walk through it. Talks about what they're doing, so if there's instructions to it. It has definitions on it, so that, what do you mean by an evacuation order or warning or a level 2 closure? What's your definition? Well, it's right there, and you can amend that to the law enforcement agency's definitions if they don't want to use evacuation orders and you want to use mandatory evacuations instead or whatever. And then it gets into the actual form. This is a Word document. It's fill in the blank. You can bang it out either with a pencil or a pen. This first page is what we use for immediate need. Hey, I need something right now. I can say affected areas, the community of Santa Margarita. It's under an evacuation warning. My decision point in Block 3 is if it crosses the ridge, we'll put it into a warning. If it crosses Highway 101, we'll put Santa Margarita into evacuation order. And using your S-band or just common sense, how many hours it takes to get there, incident commander sign it, and law enforcement signs it, or your ops signs it, and that's just a down and dirty, what is it we want to do, and it's now memorialized in writing. As we get a little more detail-orientated on the plan need, there's your traffic control points will go in, where we want to set traffic control points to isolate this fire, and how do we want to staff them, what level are they, how we want to get this information out to the citizens and the communities affected. So are we using a reverse 911 emergency alert system? Are we going door to door? Who's doing it? When is it initiated? What are the public routes, evacuation routes, so we're not sending the public on the same roads as our emergency responders trying to get in to help them if we can. Public shelters and safe points, where are we sending folks to, and contact information for Red Cross or whoever's at those shelters. In California, the last couple of years, large animals and pet shelters have become a huge deal, especially, if you've seen what's happening in the Gulf Coast after hurricanes and stuff. So shelters that are up and running now, and then again, because it's so controversial, we've added the definitions behind it. So now everyone's out. We got a plan to get them back in. So we added a repopulation plan, and once we figure that we want to start to repopulate some areas, we're going to look at make sure it's safe to do so. Is the fire or the emergency threat mitigated? Are the utilities, are we putting it back into an area that has features that we've come to know here in America? We have gas, we have telephone, we have water, we have electricity. Are the roads safe to drive on? Does law enforcement have having jurisdiction approve it? So that's in there. And so we start going through all these checklists in there to make sure that they have buy-in on it. And once everyone's got buy-in on it, we start get a IC signature from law enforcement and from the incident, and then we disseminate this plan out to everybody. So that's our evacuation repopulation plan. You can use this that plan. I'm trying to get back to the webinar. So I'm coming back to you now, Tim.
Okay, I'm going to
there it is. Stop
share your PowerPoint again. Okay, it should come up in a moment.
Okay.
So I can send that document out to everyone.
I'm sorry?
I can send that document out to everyone too if you'd like to share it.
That'd be great.
Okay.
You can use the FIRESCOPE immediate checklist, or you can use that one and fix it the way you want it. We've had good success with that on the CAL FIRE teams. Let's talk about structure defense. Again, we say the best way to defend a structure is to put the fire out. So we're choosing to use conventional wildland tactics just to put the fire out through development or line construction. Sending firefighters out there and getting on it and putting it out. But we also recognize that there's other ways we can be more effective. Unfortunately, the last couple of years, our American military has been at war. But one of the things that's come out of there is we've got a lot of good experience coming out of the armed services and entering into emergency responders. And with them, they're bringing true and proven tactics. And one of those is PACE. Military's used it very effectively over the last many years, and we're starting to incorporate that into the fire service and the emergency responders. PACE is a program that allows an incident commander to impart leader's intent, or allows a supervisor to talk to their firefighters and tell them what it is he or she wants, and then it allows the firefighters, based on PACE, to go through a series of steps, always knowing what their objectives are, what their leader's intent is, and be successful. So it offers a primary plan. Hey, I want you to staff, put hose lays around the structure and protect the structure. The alternate plan is if we can start getting a bunch of spot fires, we're going to fall back. We're going to pick up the spot fires, and we're going to pick up that little spot over we just had, and still protect the structure. Go back and clean it up. Contingency plan is we're going to, if it gets too hot, if we see fire behavior, we're going to fall back on along our escape routes to our safety zones, using our TRAs if we need to. Once the fire moves through, then we'll go back and redeploy. And then the escape route, which is basically everybody, every crew go to survival, which is in the home or using their fire shelter or whatever. So this can be used, and firefighters are doing this now. This just formalizes it and helps young officers who are not used to giving orders, helps them to say, okay, PACE, what's my primary plan? What's my alternate plan? What's my contingency plan? What's my escape plan? Articulate that out so that everybody, all the subordinates understand what it is that they want. So that's PACE, and you start to see that more. Another thing that we're using now is what we call DRAW-D. It's a way of understanding what level of engagement you're in. So let's look at that. At any given time in an action, the incident commanders are doing one of these certain things. They're either defending a piece of ground, and that's what we're drawing on. We're not being offensive. We're being defensive. We're going to hold this ridge. We're going to hold this community or hold this road. Once I have additional resources or the fire behavior changes, we'll be able to reinforce it. So we're going to send more folks in there. Once I have the ability to, once I have enough sufficient resources or the fire has died down, I'm going to advance on it. I'm going to go offensive on it. At some point, if you're withdrawing, that's again a defensive posture, and you're backing back out, or you're delaying. We're going to wait until I have resources, or we're going to delay until the weather changes or the fuels change. This again is just something for everyone to look at and articulate as a leaders, as an incident commander, so that if I'm coming in with my strike team and the incident commander says, hey, you know what, I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to delay on this one for a little bit. I'm just going to defend that one subdivision. I come in with my strike team thinking I can take advantage of this and I can go offensive on this. I'm now advancing when the incident commander wants us to withdraw. So there's a conflict there. And so that's what we're trying to do, is how do we articulate that? And we're going to use TRIAGE to articulate that. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So you'll see that in the FIRESCOPE document as well. CAL FIRE is big on this appropriate action. There's some curriculums that are out there right now that talk about independent action. We've always understood that freelancing is not appropriate, it's bad. Some curriculums say, well, take independent action. Well, what we said is independent action is no different from freelancing, because it doesn't meet the incident commander's needs. It doesn't, if you don't know what the objectives are of the incident, then that's freelancing. If we take appropriate action based on the CAL FIRE's leader's intent, if our incident commanders use PACE and TRIAGE appropriately and give good instructions, then appropriate action will allow them, their subordinates, to go out there and take the appropriate action, meet the incident's objectives, and put the fire out. So that's something we're really pushing in on. And, I wish I had more time with you guys, but hopefully that made sense to you. If you have additional questions, you can certainly get me offline, and I'd love to sit there and talk to you with it. I'll skip this. I think I hit it. let's look at some structure defense tactical actions. We came up with 3 primary tactics and 5 secondary tactics. We didn't make these up. We didn't say, hey, this is something new. We just took a bunch of old crusty, to be honest with you, wrinkled and gray firefighters and said, what have you been doing for the last 25, 30, 35 years? It was amazing. You all have similar experiences, and all we did is we just put names to them. Again, what we want is if someone shows up on my fire and I say, hey, I want you to get in there and prep and go, that would be just like telling a firefighter, I want you to go and do vertical ventilation. We want that to be common knowledge. We want everyone to understand that same terminology. So that's how we're trying to formalize this. So let's walk through some of these things. Many of you have heard these things before. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. But check and go is a rapid evaluation of the building or the structure. We want to make sure it's safe. We want to start to prepare some maps on it. We want to make sure that there's no, when I say safe, that there's no civilians in there. We're basically understand that it's probably not going to be defensible, or I got 2 engines and 15, 20 structures. Hey, jump in there and check and go everything, figure out, triage out, figure out what's your priority, and then hit your priorities. So that's check and go. And here's a quick little picture on it. The engine pulls up, backs in, ready to go. I just got escape routes to either side. Looking for my little, there it is. Come on. Lost my little pointer. Doesn't want to point anymore.
Just hold down the mouse button.
I'm doing it. I'm holding down as hard as I can.
Huh.
All right, it's up in the corner. There it is. Got it.
It worked for me just there.
It was up in the corner. I couldn't grab it. Now I got it now. All right, so I got some escape routes to either side. Fire's coming in there. In this case, the fire behavior doesn't allow them to stay in there, so they're going to run around, see if there's any civilians in there. Once they see it, they understand that it's not defendable. There's no civilians. They got a good picture on their mind, though, so that when they come back in later on, they'll be able to go straight to work. Prep and go means that they have some time to do some work on it. It's either threatened defensible or threatened non-defensible, but they're going to jump in there, do some work on it, and then get out of there. So in the same picture, they're in there, got a couple of minutes before this fire front hits them. So they're removing some concentrated fuels. They're hardening the structure, shutting windows, shutting garage doors, applying some foam or gels on it. Again, checking for civilians. There's none in there. The engine's mobile. They pack it back up and drive away. Check and go. Prep and defend is your classic structure defense tactic. You show up, the engine's there. It's going to ride it out. There's structure or safety zones there. There's TRAs. It's a safe place to stay, but they need to be there for that flame front. So in this case, there's some perimeter control options going on. The dozer's tying into the aircraft. They're going to ride it out. The aircraft should hopefully take some of the heat out, slow the fire down. If it hits it, it'll come down out of the canopy. There's some spot fires they're able to pick up. They're going to ride this one out. They've got good defensible space around it. And, of course, they still have escape routes to safety zones, but there's probably a TRA around here based on, TRA is either the vehicle or the lee side of this structure based on the fire behavior. Fire front following is a defensive tactic. It's behind, the engines stay behind the fire front. It's you got a fast-moving fire, lots of flame intensity, so they're going to stay behind the fire front, and they're going to extinguish hot spots, spot fires, look for victims, take care of civilians, put the fires out that are burning on the roof, eaves, the decks, things like that. They're basically running behind that fire front because we don't have the resources or the fire behavior is too intense to put the fire out or stay in front of it. So again, it's a defensive tactic, and we want to make sure the firefighters understand that. So at some point they realize that they can't do fire front following forever and ever. At some point they got to get out and put the fire out. So in this case, the fire's burned through the subdivision, and they got a house that's complete loss, so they're not dealing with it. A couple houses that they're working on over here. They got some resources to help and assist. They're hotspotting over here, just basically trying to put these things out. And as the fire keeps moving, they'll stay moving with that fire and do the same thing with the structures as they go through. Again, they're not putting all the fires and the structures out, just the ones they can get and keep mobile, and they're not doing any perimeter control. So we want to switch to perimeter control. Bump and run is that classic tactic where you're actually either in front of it or right on the edge of it. As the fire burns through you, you back up, you move out, get back out in front of it, where you run out and try and extinguish hot spot fires in front of the fire. You're trying to defend structures by hardening it. The fire burns through, you protect it, wrap up your engine, and go again. Again, this is a defensive tactic unless you're able to start steering it towards someplace. And you can start steering it by connecting the dots, which we'll talk about here in a second. When you're doing bump and run, trying to start to pick up small edges and move it from, or pick up small bits and pieces of fire from road to road or house to house to try and slow it down and take the heat out of it, take some of the energy out of it. So in this case, they're ahead of the fire front, coming through here, so they're ahead of it. They're putting out spot fires. They're hardening these structures. They're trying to, close some stuff up. In this case, this individual believed that they could put some fire on that structure and extinguish it and protect that home. Tankers are still working and got good access and egress. Anchor and hold is a tactic that's used when a fire runs through the homes, when it's getting into organized communities, neighborhoods, commercial areas, and the vegetation is no longer the primary carrier or the primary mechanism of fire spread. It's the structures. We saw this down in the old fire, the Grand Prix fire, some of the big sieges where it burned 10, 15, 20 city blocks. You saw down San Diego as well. Traditional Type 3s aren't going to work by themselves. You need big water, big guns, big municipal engines. So they're actually, this is one of the few places where we encourage hooking into fire hydrants, using master streams, using 1 3/4 and large bore tips, and putting out the fire, which is the homes. The spotting mechanism is the homes themselves. So putting those things out. Type 3s and Type 4s and crews will work in the ember cast, but the true thing here is, municipal engines. So in this case, it's burnt through. This home here is fully involved. It's shooting embers out, and that's what's, this house or the fire in the house is what's causing everything else to burn. So we want to use big water, big streams, and start to extinguish this area. All right. Connecting the dots at any time you can while you're doing defensive tactics. You want to start to connect the dots, and that's just basically starting to put water on the ground or line on the ground and go from house to house. If you can start, small tactics like that, you're going to take the energy out of the fire. You're going to take the heat out of it, and allow those folks that are downrange of you to be more successful, because it's not going to have the flame front that had when it hits you. So at some point, we're starting to turn from defensive to offensive when you start to connect the dots. Jack Cohn did a really good, actually several good studies. It's proven that the vast majority of fires structures aren't lost with the flame front. They're not lost in the first 15, 20 minutes of a wildland urban interface fire. They're lost 10, 12 hours after the fire burns through. That's something we've missed up until recently. We don't put engines out there to patrol out behind the homes, and so we'll be out there fighting fire because that's the fun stuff. We'll be out there, doing fire front song and bump and run and doing all those tactics. Or the next day, when it's left the subdivision and we're up on the hillside now, away from the homes, you'll see a black column come up. Structure just went up, and it's 12 hours after the flame front. We saw this quite a bit in Hezecita. So we want to have a tactical control, and this is just a light little vehicles or Type 3s or Type 4s. Municipal engines can do it as well. Running through the subdivisions, walking around the houses, looking in the eaves, looking for sleepers, looking for creepy crawly fire in the porches. So something that we're missing, but we're starting to hit now. ICS Organization. One of the things that we're talking about, and I hit this earlier, is we're trying to reduce the layers of firefighting staff out in the ICS organization by limiting the use of structure groups. It's not that groups are bad, but we want to put all the authority for that piece of ground with the division supervisors. So we're starting to come up with structure defense task forces, and this is just an example of what it looks like in this scenario. It could be anything. It could be 2 strike teams. It could be 1 engine. It could be whatever you want. But in this case, I tell that division supervisor, hey, you're out there in division X-ray. Your job is to mop up and patrol a line from point A to point B, and your job is to construct line from point B to point C and tie it in, and to defend and protect structures in your area. So he's got resources to construct line. He's got resources to put hose lays in along the line. He's got resources to do structure defense. At some point, if he gets out there and he's got more of a structure defense issue than a perimeter control, the weather changes, he'll allocate all of his resources to protect those structures. If it gets out there and he or she says, hey, you know what, if I put this fire out, we go from B to C, mop up that and put that line in there, I'm going to reallocate these guys over here from the structure task force. I'm going to put them in here to perimeter control, and we're going to do it, but it all flows, it all works evenly. And we've had great success with that. In fact, our local government, municipal cooperators report that they're loving it because they're no longer sitting out on their bumper 3 days in a row watching everyone else work. They're out there working, and they're getting their education and experience, and it's much better for the tax dollar, much better for the taxpayer. So we strongly encourage it. We want to remember that structure defense planning and preparation are, when they get too complex, we want to use those groups that we talked about, those divisions, the structure defense task forces. I'm even having issues saying it now. And the naming convention could be, structure group or structure task force 1, structure task force 2. That allows them to move from division to division. So that's kind of the end of the presentation. Here are some of the references that we use to get to this point. The IRPG, the FIRESCOPE FOG, our CAL FIRE handbook, State Fire Marshal's Command 1C. Here are some links to those documents. This is an important one right here. I strongly encourage you to click onto that at some point. CAL FIRE put together about a 20-minute video that talks about it, and it's narrated by our director, and it goes through all the things I just talked about. If you want to see the protective actions that I discussed from FIRESCOPE, they're right here at this link. The FIRESCOPE WUI doc is right here, so a lot of the things we talked about, leader's intent and the evacuation orders or evacuation template is right there. And then the incident response pocket guide, I've been talking about the IRPG, and it's referenced right here.
And this is Tim. I can email those links out to everyone too, just so you'll have them. Yeah.
This is my office cell phone number and my email address if anyone has any questions that they want to catch offline. If not, I'm available, I guess, for the next little bit to answer some questions as well.
Yeah, so if there are any questions for Phil, and thank you, Phil, you gave an excellent rundown of a topic that is not simple. So feel free to type them into the chat box over there. I'm going to switch us over to another sort of webinar room, which just has more space to look at questions. So feel free to type them in. The chat box is now on the sort of middle left-hand side of the screen. All right. Well,
that must mean that I did a really good job.
Exactly.
They're going to catch me offline.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, I just see Chris is typing one. If there are any more questions, you can definitely let Phil know. And yeah, he's made himself available, and I'll send out all those links. So we can give folks a few more moments here to type in any questions.
Okay.
But I'll also be sending out a follow-up evaluation survey. We do this for all of our webinars. It's just give feedback for the design of the webinar, and any comments on the presentation can all go into there. Those will be in my follow-up email also. So if you have any questions, get them in quick. Yeah, this will be a great recording to have. This has a lot of good training uses, I think.
Okay.
Scott Williams asked if a PDF of the PowerPoint will be available. Would that be okay to share?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're more than welcome to use it. And again, that video that the link I gave you to, that's a good one for it as well.
And Tom Kova had a question. He asked if there are any rules of thumb for setting good trigger and decision points.
The decision points are going to be based on your fire behavior and what it is you're trying to get to. So if you've got a rate of spread that says it's going to be in this town in 2 hours, and it's going to take me an hour to evacuate it, then you need to pick a good trigger point that's 1 hour out, and that's just kind of how we do it. So when we're using decision points, we're looking at fire behavior, we're talking to the S-band, we're talking to the operations staff, and in my example, I'm talking to the law enforcement folks to say, how long is it going to take you to evacuate that? You got to get folks in from your law enforcement mutual aid system. What is a realistic point for that? So that's really what drives that decision point. Remember that decision points can be used for a variety of reasons. I've used decision points to say, hey, we're going to put, I'll use Santa Margarita again, we're going to put Santa Margarita into a evacuation warning when it crosses this spot, crosses Highway 101. But we'll put the community of Santa Margarita into evacuation order for special needs populations. I've got a population in there of senior citizens or a skilled care nursing facility. It's going to take longer to evacuate. We can use that decision point for two different protective actions. The other thing to remember, though, is it's a decision point. That's why we change it from trigger points. Trigger point means, hey, it's crossed Highway 101 under Phil's scenario. That means we pull the trigger and we're going to evacuate Santa Margarita. No, it's a decision. Well, because that was one spot fire over there. They picked it up at 3 foot by 3 foot, and now it's out. Well, we made a decision that we're not going to evacuate on that decision point. But if that spot fire comes over and it's 5 acres and running, then we will make a decision to evacuate it. That's the difference between decisions and trigger points. A good question, Tom.
Yeah, it's an important clarification there. Okay, we might have one more question from Clara Quesada coming. And Clara's joining us from Spain. She writes, in Spain we don't have too many problems with evacuations until now because of the situation of the roads of many fire-prone zones. So how is the situation in California? And do you have the same problem?
Can you repeat that for me, please? I missed the middle part.
Yeah, so in Spain there aren't too many, let me see if I'm just copying and pasting it over here. So it is on the screen now as question number 2 in that question and answer box. She's writing that they don't have many problems with evaluations right now because, and maybe Clara, you could specify what the situation of the roads in many fire-prone zones is. So I suppose she's asking, are evacuations common in California?
Evacuations are very common, and one of the problems that we have, especially in the rural areas, is that our roads are very narrow and sometimes one way. So we're trying to put firefighters in on one road that's being evacuated by the civilian population. So we always strive to have 2 routes, one for civilians to evacuate out and one for firefighters to drive in on. We've had some pretty spectacular events in the past where we've done contraflow, where we've basically closed down 2 lanes, and instead of having 2-lane traffic, both lanes are going the same direction. You've seen that in the south as well. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think you did. And Clara also added she thinks that there will be more evacuations in Spain in the future.
Well, what we're finding is, especially as more people move out into the wildland, that there's an expectation that they're going to be taken care of and that everything's going to be handled, and so they're not as self-sufficient as they used to be, the population out there.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for the question, Clara, and thanks again, Phil, for the presentation and for joining us. And thanks, everyone, for making it. I'll email out all of Phil's links and that survey that I mentioned. So everyone, yeah, have a good afternoon. And Phil, if you could just stay on the line, we can touch base now.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate your time.